This is the Applecross Peninsula in northwest Scotland, with the Isles of Rona and Raasay and Skye providing a stunning backdrop. But we're not interested in the scenery. This being Time Team, we're going to the campsite over here. Nick Goldthorpe and his family have lived here for over 30 years. And ever since he was a boy, he's been playing here among the strange stones and mysterious structures on this site. But now he wants to know more, which is why we're about to unpick this. The remains of what could be a massive 2,000-year-old tower that once dominated the skyline. It means removing tons of rock by hand and then excavating through possibly 1,000 years of occupation. And we've got just 3 days to do it. Oh, and we're right underneath an 11,000 volt power line. You don't get much more remote than this. Applecross is cut off from the rest of the Scottish mainland by a range of mountains. Its main road is frequently closed in bad weather, and yet this small piece of land seems to be awash with archaeology, potentially spanning thousands of years. What do you reckon you've got on this land?
In theory, they tell us we've got a broch and up here and some Iron Age buildings, a stone circle, some agricultural cycle stones or equinox stones.
It's not bad amounts having your back garden.
No, not at all.
I mean, you can't fail to notice that ridge, though.
Yeah, well, you can't miss it, and there's all sorts of things on the top if you wander across it, you know, odd earthworks and bits of stone and so on. So there's something up there.
What?
Well, the suggestion is a broch, isn't it? That's what you, what you were saying. So,
like Victor's drawn.
Like Victor's drawn here, which, you know, you need to think of them as sort of fortified stone towers. And I tend to think of them as something like the small medieval castles where the sort of local minor lord might have lived, something like that. But you know, 1,500 years earlier.
Well, a large posh stone tower sounds like a good place to start. And Mick hasn't wasted any time. In fact, he's already opened 2 trenches across the top of the ridge to look for the structure. This must be some kind of record for you. How come you hadn't seen the geophys, we hadn't had the discussion even about what the thing was going to be, and there they are hacking away?
Because if you look at the topography, you can see that we've got a great rounded flat-top mound here.
So this is the curve of it going.
Yeah, and you see, you get to somewhere like here and it starts to drop away and it's flat on the top. So we've just put a trench across that to see if we're going to pick walls up within it. And we've done the same over there. We've got great big blocks of stonework. So it's the old way before geophysics, you see.
But it's all looking rather promising.
Yeah, it is.
Which scares the life out of me on day one. And of course there is a problem. As we strip off the turf, it quickly becomes clear this is one of the stoniest landscapes we've ever done.
Isn't this horrible to work?
And our task's been made all the more difficult because of this. An 11,000 volt electricity cable passing directly over the site, which means no matter how much we'd like to use them, mechanical diggers are out of the question.
That ain't much of a tool, Ian.
I have heard that before.
We've brought in experts on the Scottish Iron Age from all over the country.
We're looking at a site that's been occupied for a long time, so we might...
And their first task is to help us determine if the stone tower is a broch, a monumental structure that would have been the focal point for the local community.
Look at that.
Yay.
Basically, these are dry stone towers. There's no mortar or anything involved. It's a big stone roundhouse. You've got a massively thick wall foundation.
How tall would they have been?
Best preserved ones today are up to about 13 metres in height. Now, not every broch would have been that high, but certainly up to that sort of level.
And how did they build them that high?
One of the keys to it really is that you have this trick of building 2 concentric circular walls.
Oh, it's not just one wall?
No, you've got a corridor or a gallery that runs in between, and basically the 2 walls then kind of lean in on each other.
So why doesn't it just collapse?
Really, it's the intricacy of the bonding of this dry stone. It's a fantastic level of achievement in dry stone masonry to actually build this thing, but the whole thing just kind of holds itself together.
Broch Brochs are only found in Scotland, and their design of two concentric walls gives them a unique, easily identified footprint. Well, that's the theory. The reality, though, is more complicated. We're looking for dry stone walls here, built on a stony landscape and covered in stony rubble. The challenge isn't so much finding a needle in a haystack as finding a needle in a very big pile of similarly sized needles.
So this one's good, but this stuff isn't any good.
Yeah. I mean, I think all this stuff in here is interesting with all these voids. I mean, you can feel there's a lot of air under these stones all over the place. So conceivably you might have collapse from the wall going down with all these voids in it, and then perhaps some kind of surface consolidated over the top, something like that.
But even when geophys managed to filter out some of the stony noise...
Good. Look, this is the resistance. We've got a clear curve coming round here.
The results aren't enough to convince the brochologists.
So is that conclusive?
Well, we've certainly got something. We've got a nice flat-topped stony mound, so if it's not a broch, it's going to be something.
Like what?
I would think. Well, really, in this area, you've got Iron Age settlement sites of all shapes and sizes built out of stone. So even if we don't have a broch tower in that sort of very striking, conventional sense, there's every chance we've got some kind of version of that overall tradition.
So we need to keep digging to see if this circular structure has one wall or two. And at last, it seems that features are emerging from a sea of stones.
Right.
I mean, we're beginning to make some sort of sense of it, or we think we are.
Right.
We think that this might be either the inside or the outside of the wall.
Right.
You know, one edge of it, in other words.
Yeah.
And then possibly it looks like we got some of these stones in here that are actually bedded in, can actually interleave and form the core of the wall.
So I'm on top of the wall and you're on the outside there?
I'm on one edge of it, you're on the other edge, and through the middle is the actual core of the wall. I mean, it really is early days yet.
But that's pretty good, isn't it, for just starting like that?
Yeah.
Phil's wall fits in rather nicely with John's geophys results and gives us a possible exterior wall line for the tower. And there could be an even more important discovery in Matt's trench.
Yeah, but I'm pretty certain we've got the inner wall there. So I'd be standing in the void.
That's right. So you think the inner wall here?
Yep.
And you're standing in the corridor or the gallery?
I'm standing in the gallery, yeah.
And then this would be the
outer wall.
The outer wall?
Yeah.
So the outer wall would have two faces then, this one and potentially one down there, Brigid?
Well, we haven't got to one down here yet. All we've got is the one that you can see there, which is just, you know, straight up towards you.
Well, an outer wall, a corridor and an interior wall. That seems to me pretty convincing evidence that a broch once stood here. But broch experts aren't given to such rash judgments.
Is it a broch, Andy?
It's too early to say. I mean, if we're digging these type of sites, it would usually take probably a week of deturfing, etc.
Yeah.
A slightly larger area to try and get the walls, if you like. We've done an enormous amount in the morning, but at the moment we're seeing large stones that may be part of walls, maybe a couple bits of coursing. And this jumble of stone, it's quite easy to, in plan, just to invent walls, if you like. I'd be happier when we had a couple more bits of coursing, more substantial walls.
So it's like out of focus at the moment?
There are nice hints, but it's not there just yet.
We're now well into the afternoon of day one. It's beginning to get very wet, and we've still got loads of other archaeology to investigate around Nick's campsite.
But you seem to have some walls, don't you, coming across here?
Yeah, it looks man-made, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I think we might clear that up and have a look at it later on.
So I can't help but feel frustrated that no one's prepared to commit to what this big round circular structure is, even though brochs apparently dominated the Iron Age Highlands and Islands.
I've got this map which shows a distribution. This is Skye here, you can see there's a lot round the edge. And this is the peninsula we're working on here. This is Applecross just here.
Why are the dots lots of different colours?
Well, these are sites that either could be brochs or they could be dunes or they could be hill forts. No, that differentiation is very difficult to make. These are sites all fit that same pattern.
So all over Scotland they've been having the same problem as us. It's Brochish, but we're not quite sure.
This is one of the things I think we're experiencing on the excavation, that there's a wide range of variation in these structures, and unless it's really well preserved and unless you've got it excavated, you really can't distinguish these things in the ground.
What about the landscape, Stuart? Could we work out whether or not it's likely that there's a broch here from what's around it?
I think that's a very legitimate question. What we've got to do is look at the factors which affect where brochs are situated. What's going on here which makes this such an attractive place to be?
So what do you think he should be looking for?
Really, I mean, it's agricultural resources, it's a range of resources that would support a population, you know, throughout the seasons. It's all of those kinds of things. Good access to the coast we know we've got here. It's those kinds of things that all come together in the bay at Applecross.
So you're going to have to go out and find that?
Unfortunately, yes.
Lucky it's not raining. Stuart's search for traces of Iron Age agriculture may be the only evidence we find of the people that once lived and farmed around the tower. Because finds that we can reliably date are a rare commodity on Scottish Iron Age sites.
The problem with the pottery here is that for millennia they just used the same local materials to make the pottery, so body shards aren't going to tell you whether it's Iron Age or Pictish or even much, much later, because making pot from local clays went on really right through the 17th, almost the 18th centuries in some places.
Well, hopefully we'll have more luck with the big archaeology. Possibly these rectangular structures just outside the stone tower, where Mick's decided to move some of our diggers.
We can see what we think is the edge of the broch clearly. We can see bits of those structures, but we're not getting anything extra out of it.
Okay. But clearly we should do something across this, shouldn't we, Andy?
I think we should open a long trench here because it's not that common to find external buildings outside the broch in this part of the world.
Right.
If we're going to find them, they're going to be in this bit here. We can see that there are buildings here on the ridge.
This trench won't just hit these rectangular features, but also the edge of our large circular structure. And as soon as we open it, we hit stone. But good stone, as in something that looks suspiciously like dry stone walling.
This is looking like another faced wall, isn't it, Ellen?
Yeah, well, it's in the right position on the slope.
It's completely, and it's exactly the same stone with the same kind of wear on that side.
Yeah.
And if that wasn't enough, within minutes we find a second wall.
Happy with that, Andy?
More than happy.
I reckon 3 stones make a wall.
Yep.
It's a short wall.
Very short wall.
What we're seeing is the outer face over there.
Have you got something?
Well, it's looking like...
What? Suddenly we seem to be finding walls everywhere. In Matt's trench, the brochologists think they've now sorted out what all these stones mean.
You may conceivably have an inner face running along in here. In here it's much looser, much smaller rubble than obviously in here where you've got nice, packed, big, chunky stones. So conceivably this is the inner face to go with our outer face. So we seem to have picked up in 2 places elements of walling.
So one of the places is over here somewhere?
Yeah.
That's... what? This bit here?
Yep. Yeah, and if we can match that up with what we've got around in the other trench, then we can begin to see if the walling is reflecting the overall shape of the mound that we're seeing topographically.
So we're getting somewhere?
We're getting somewhere.
The only problem now is that the newly discovered outer walls in Matt and Brigid's trenches mean that the big solid wall in Phil's trench has got nothing to do with the tower. It's probably a later structure built of reused stone. Mick, I didn't know as many broch experts existed.
No, neither did I.
As I've found today up the top of this hill.
Yeah.
So why do they keep changing their minds as to precisely what's going on here?
Well, I suppose what we've been doing is looking for an outer and inner wall, and then inner and outer walls within that. And so every time we come across what looks like a line of stones, there's another suggestion that might be a passage, it might be a chamber. Then they clear the rubble away and it disappears.
I have to say I was a bit nervous about this dig. I thought, well, it's either going to be a mound of rubble or it's going to be a broch, in which case we'll have solved it by the end of the day.
Not as easy as that.
It's quite exciting,
not as
isn't it?
easy as that.
And even at the end of the day, the brochologists refused to budge from their cautious approach.
So, have we got the broch?
You've not got a broch. That's me starting.
All right, that's the first bit. Have we got a broch?
It's the right size and it's the right shape, and it's hard to think what else it's going to be. So.
The walls we found seem to fit a shape that seems to fit the geophysics, so possibly.
I think they're almost saying yes, Tone, actually.
But not quite. Do you reckon we'll know tomorrow?
Yes.
It's day 2 of our Iron Age dig in Applecross, and another not so sunny day in Western Scotland.
It's a bit grim up north, isn't it?
And that's bad news for the members of our team who, inspired by the rugged beauty of the place, have decided to camp on site.
Mick, I don't understand why people go on Mediterranean holidays when they can enjoy the Great British Summer.
Nor me. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Come camping instead.
We're still trying to work out if this huge pile of rocks is a broch, a large stone tower unique to Scotland. And despite finding a number of walls yesterday, our jury of brochologists is still to be convinced. What they are sure of is that there was once a very substantial building on this ridge.
These must have been fairly simple farming people, and yet they're building these incredibly sophisticated structures.
Well, yes, but I'm sure the analogy is something like the towers that you get in Scotland in the Middle Ages, which are basically a series of rooms, one on top of another one. It's like a stacked manor house. And what you get in there is the local bigwig. But he needn't be very big. You know, he's just a bit more wealthy and influential than all the other farmers. And that sort of idea I find quite attractive for these things. I can't believe everybody lived in them. But if you talk to each of the experts today, you'll get at least 3 different opinions, if not more.
Surprise, surprise.
To qualify as one of these high-status brochs, the structure has to have 2 concentric outer walls with staircases and corridors in between them. And we found bits of wall in Matt and Brigid's trenches that suggest we could be looking at the footprint of a substantial tower.
It's 18 metres in diameter. The walls in the trenches match exactly with the geophysics. That's a big structure up there. It's got to be a broch.
Ian, tell us it's a broch.
It's even more probably a broch than it was
Oh,
last night.
Ian, come on, mate. What more do you need?
I'll tell you what it is. It's the right size, it's the right shape. It's a big dry stone roundhouse, so we're in the right territory, definitely. But these broch-like things are pretty varied, and the real clincher is going to be back up on site in the new trench. If we can get 2 concentric walls for definite, then we've got a broch.
We've closed Phil's trench as it's now obviously outside the tower. And now he's extending Matt's trench where we think we may have a corridor.
Let's liberate some more dirt.
And Brigid's trench is looking promising too.
We've got the 3 stones that we got yesterday with the facing on this side. And we're interpreting that at the moment as the external face of the external wall of this possible broch feature.
So it's sort of the massive stones like we've got over there, aren't they, on the edge?
They're very big.
Yeah, quite similar. And then if you come to here, it looks like we've got good packing within a wall.
Yeah.
And then we thought yesterday we might have another face to the wall.
Right, where this line is across here?
Yeah, we've got these 3 stones basically running straight up towards you, parallel to those ones there.
The outer wall is substantial, well over 1 metre thick. But Brigid and Andy think they've also uncovered another similarly sized internal wall with a potential corridor running between them. They now need to prove it by digging. To be fair to the brochologists, their refusal so far to confirm what we have isn't just down to the architecture. it would help if we had proof our structure is from the Scottish Iron Age. That's 700 BC to about 400 AD. And that search for dating evidence has led us to this potential midden or rubbish tip, situated rather inconveniently on the increasingly slippery side of the ridge.
Why on earth would there be a midden 2/3 of the way down the hill?
Well, it didn't start off 2/3 of the way down the hill. Somebody stood at the top of the slope there and chucked a bucket of kitchen slops out, and it just found its way down.
So, can you date some of this stuff?
We've got second bit of pottery from the whole dig, unfortunately not diagnostic. Possible hammerstone. I think it's got area of wear there from being used like that. For possibly crushing bone for their marrow. We've got shells, we've got limpets, mussels. That's all from meals.
Could any of this stuff be Iron Age?
Not definitely. Not here yet, no.
It's the middle of day 2, and all we've got to show Nick Goldthorpe, who invited us here, are a big round structure of indeterminate date and design, a pit full of rubbish of indeterminate date and design, and a lot of very, very wet archaeologists. Many of them of indeterminate date and design.
So, do you think that's natural?
The whole ridge is a natural feature, yeah. It's created by glaciation thousands and thousands of years ago. As the glaciers melted, they drop all the sand and rubbish below them and boulders and so on. And it's like a long, thin tail of what's called moraine. So it's a natural ridge, and the Broch, if that's what it is, was sat on top of it.
Another thing Nick's asked us to look at are a series of stones in his dad's back garden, which he's been told are part of an ancient stone circle.
What do you think then, Raksha? Just a quick
well,
look.
I've had an earlier look and I quite fancy this one here.
Right.
It's kind of half sticking out and some of it is still in there.
But a quick archaeological inspection by Raksha and her trusty helper show they're just more relics of the receding Ice Age.
Okay, if you just have a look under there. Yeah. You see that we're actually at the bottom of it now and it's actually sitting on the bottom of this clean soil.
Oh yes, I see.
How's it going?
Well, we're getting there.
We've got to the bottom now, I'm afraid.
Right.
There's no cut, there's no packing stones, there's nothing. It's just very clean. It's just been naturally deposited, I'm afraid.
Right.
There are boulders like this all over Applecross, but Stuart believes that even though they're a natural phenomenon, they hold a vital clue in his hunt for evidence of Iron Age agriculture.
And this one's particularly nice. It's completely free of stone in this area. And this very large slab of rock here has got little stones piled on top of it. Now, in upland areas, this is very typical of clearance to create fields in the prehistoric period. This sort of activity occurs from the Bronze Age onwards, and it's literally man settling down in a landscape, starting to create little fields. And then when you start turning the soil over, you start digging up smaller stones, and that's the evidence that they just put them somewhere out of the way. So you get all these cairns dotted all over this landscape here. And this is quite possible some of these fields actually go with the same period that the Broch's being built as well. So this is really stunning to see this here.
You got something there, John?
Yeah, I think it's a bead, Phil.
Up on the ridge, our luck may just have changed. This could be our first datable find.
Gosh, stone half crows. How did you manage to identify that in this dirt? God. It's beautiful, but it's tiny. Small. Yeah. Cathy, do you want to have a look at that?
Yes. Do you mind if I lick it? Well, it's definitely glass. Do you want to wash it?
No, gosh.
Just looks like it made of stone, but are you sure that's glass?
Yeah. Taste it.
And remember,
glass
kids,
taste like?
don't
Not
try
plastic.
this at home.
Yeah, I got a bit of green on it there, yeah, definitely. There you go, Phil, taste that, it's tasty.
Now, the all-important question, can you tell how old it is?
I can't, but I've seen almost identical black glass beads in an Iron Age context, not that far away from here.
Ah,
so
so
it's
that's
looking
the
very
sort
good.
of answer we want, isn't it?
It's perhaps the smallest thing on site, but this bead seems to put us firmly in the Iron Age, the time of the Brochs. And the big archaeology is beginning to shape up as well.
What are you doing, Andy?
Well, we think this is the outside of our Broch or roundhouse wall.
Yeah.
But you see this big stone here?
Yeah.
This is very similar to the ones that Brigid's been getting round in her trench, the big, very, very massive ones.
Yeah.
So we're really running out of room. So we've recorded all this, it's all been planned. We ideally want to try and have a look at in here now, so we're going to peel back to about here, remove all these stones.
So you're going to lift all this stuff out?
Well, I'm going to clear that one.
Yeah.
And Dougie here is going to clear that one.
I think you've chosen the right bloke for the job.
Yes. Come on, Dougie.
It's only when you see these stones being moved manually that you begin to get an idea just how massive an undertaking it would have been to build a stone tower that may well have been over 13 metres tall. Right, Dougie's a big geezer, and that was just one stone. How on earth did they manage to shift thousands of those things?
Well, it's back to the issue of status, if you like. They obviously didn't have JCBs or cranes or anything, so you'd have to physically manhandle this type of thing. But this is why we're fairly confident that these big stones aren't near the foundation, because if you actually look at upstanding Brochs, the higher up you get, the thinner the stone is, just purely because, you know, you wouldn't be able to lift one of those like that.
Yeah.
Even Dougie couldn't do that.
It would have taken a colossal amount of effort to build one of these towers, which begs the question, what on earth was the point of them? Well, Raysan has a theory. Having experienced the bracing Scottish air, our resident architect feels a Broch was a sophisticated building designed to defend its inhabitants against the elements.
One thing that occurs to me is that this double skin is a response to thermals, how heat is used in the building. And if you have a central fire, the heat rises and you're getting convection currents, but you're drawing the cold air in through the cavity, giving it a chance to warm before it actually enters the living space. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely, yeah. You'd have your central hearth either on the ground floor or more likely on the first floor, and exactly as you say, you know, the heat is being channeled around the walls. I mean, I think the other thing with the walls is that, you know, rainwater that's battering against the side of a Broch structure like this is allowed to penetrate that outer wall, but then of course it encounters the cavity and it never makes that leap across to the inner wall. So that inner space stays dry, stays warm, basically protected from the elements.
If only our diggers had some of that protection now, because if possible, the weather has taken a turn for the worse. And yet, surprisingly, we've made progress.
This might be the foundation of the Broch, and the rest is gone. And these are actually maybe chalking or pinning stones to give the bigger stones stability before you actually dig it, if you like.
The outside wall in Matt's trench is now beginning to look really substantial, and the archaeologists suspect they may also have an inside wall.
Hopefully we'll uncover the inside wall tomorrow. But we do have some form of architectural features here. This is definitely a wall face.
So you've still got the double skin effect?
Well, what this is actually doing at the moment is a bit, we don't actually know it.
And it's a similar story in Brigid's trench. But unfortunately, the weather's hampered her attempts to see if she's got a corridor between the two walls. The crucial evidence we need to confirm we've got a Broch.
I mean, how wide do you reckon this wall is? Sort of 4.5 metres?
Well, if we think this is the internal wall here, roughly, it's going to be about 1, 2, 3, 4 and a bit metres. Seems fine.
But Brigid has made one discovery. Another structure on the ridge that seems to be made of the same stone as the tower.
You can see here we've already got the face of that wall coming along. On the other side of it, there's a lot of collapse and tumble, so we've probably lost the face of the wall on that side. And then in here, see where the pit is there? That's a wee trench that Nick put in a few years ago to have a look, and unfortunately it's gone right through the archaeology, and we just can't assess the preservation as it is at the moment, which is why we've come out this far.
You need to go down there then?
I need to go down alongside it.
Slowly and surely, the weather is beating us, the archaeology, and the equipment. And some of us are now literally treading water. John, are you not geophysics something that you geophysed 8.5 hours ago?
Yes.
Why?
I thought that, because we watched you, didn't we, from the van?
Well, slight problems with the rain.
Well,
I mean, look at it. I mean, yesterday was bad enough, but it's just turned into a sponge.
So why are you doing this again?
Well, we've got soaked, the equipment's got soaked. We've tried drying it out.
Yeah.
And so we thought we'd give it another go.
It's just impossible to work. Yeah. I think we should pack up for the day. I mean,
how would you feel about it?
Oh no, I want to carry on.
You can't see. Have you seen this? You can't see out of these.
And I can't wait to get back to my tent.
Despite our best efforts, this afternoon is turning into a washout. All we can do is keep our fingers crossed that the weather improves tomorrow. The archaeologists have been heroic, trying to excavate all these stones which have kept disappearing in a morass of mud. But that means we've only got one day left to try and sort out this labyrinth and find evidence of a date for this massive building which would have dominated the skyline and provided some shelter from the rain nearly 2,000 years ago. Beginning of day 3 here in West Scotland, and those of us who aren't camping over in Applecross have to make this scary 18-mile mountain pass drive full of hairpin bends every morning, which is quite a way to get to work. But it really does bring it home to you that 2,000 years ago, the people who lived in Applecross would have been virtually unreachable. Unreachable, and as far as I can tell, soaked for most of the time. Our bedraggled diggers are already back on site and trying to unpick the stone tower at the heart of this settlement. And through the mud and stones, we're finally beginning to see recognisable archaeology.
You see, you've got these big stones here,
Yeah.
and they're in a nice line, and they're all packed up against one another. And you've got this line running across there. And in
Right.
fact, you've got this big stone there, which is still on that line. And so what we're thinking is that this is the wall on this side, and that maybe that on that side is rubble.
This wall line is the first example we've got of the internal face of the building in this trench. While over in her trench, Brigid is now convinced that she's got evidence that the tower consisted of a separate inner and outer wall.
Look at this.
Oh, crikey.
This is the most convincing, solid wall I've seen on this site.
Yeah. Well, that line there, certainly.
So we've got this face along here, and then on the other side we've got the white shell, which looks like it's midden within the broch, and then we've got this pecking here.
So we've now got the inside wall, the outside wall, something in the middle in this trench and in that trench over there. So we can start drawing it in now, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely wicked.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And joining up all our discoveries so far gives us this. A structure 18 metres in diameter and constructed from 2 thick dry stone walls. But the work isn't over yet for our diggers, because if we want to be sure we've uncovered a broch, a uniquely Scottish Iron Age tower, then we need to find out what's going on between those walls. For a community rich and capable enough of building such a prestigious and physically impressive piece of architecture as our stone tower, I have to say this isolated piece of Scottish coastline seems a strange place to set up shop. The broch's over there behind those trees, nobody around at all except for a couple of camper vans. All these hills shrouded in mist. You come over the pass, you never pass another car. This beach, it's the middle of June and it's completely empty except for Professor Mick Aston and myself. So, 2,000 years ago, the people who lived here can't ever have seen anybody.
Yeah, but I think you're standing by the biggest clue that that wasn't the case, which is that out there.
What do you mean?
Well, it was very difficult to get here by road until very recently, but that's because everybody travelled up and down these seaways. And the real clue comes from the monastery over there. That's where Applecross Monastery was. See where the little chapel is in the trees there?
Yeah.
And we know that the monks originally, and the founder of that place, came from Northern Ireland. They came from Bangor in Northern Ireland. But there would have been a lot of traffic from Northern Ireland, across through the islands, up and down the straits, up the west coast.
It really alters your perception about the Broch, doesn't it? Up until now, I've thought of it as something that was dominating the countryside. But if you cleared those trees away, you'd see that actually it's overlooking all these boats that are coming in from far away.
Yeah.
The Applecross Peninsula is a massive piece of land. But Stuart's investigations lead him to believe that for thousands of years, most human activity centred around the tower on the ridge.
What's quite interesting, looking at an estate map of 1810, which actually has got useful information on it because it's got place name information. Yeah. Before the modern estate changed all the agricultural patterns and settlement patterns. right. And you've got Norse place names applied here to the Broch. You've got Borrowdale, and Borrow is a derivation of Bruff or fort or burg. And you've got Cullen Doon, which means field behind the fort. Two very, very old place names implying that there's been long and complex settlement, at least back to the Norse period, in that area, in that immediate area there.
And we're now finding evidence of that earlier activity outside the tower. Brigid has already uncovered one potential Iron Age building on the ridge, and the geophys is looking quite busy too.
We've extended the survey along this ridge, and we've got what appear to be a whole series of structures in this sort of area. We've got these massive responses down the slope. I think those are more likely to be geological. I think this is of far greater interest in this sort of area on top of the ridge.
John's identified a potential target, and as luck would have it, our host Nick has already started digging it, albeit quite a long time ago.
We dug it back in 1977 to put a bonfire for the Queen's Jubilee on this
right.
spot.
See, what we're thinking, Nick, is you've already done a lot of the work for us here. You know, you've done a lot. The worst part of the job, taking the top off. So if we could clean the sides up, it would tell us what there is in section inside this structure.
It's not often, even in the world of archaeology, that you start a trench and only get round to finishing it 29 years later.
Now we've got rid of all this rubble. Look at that. That's conclusive. That is the inside edge of the site.
That's lovely.
Back in the tower, Phil's cleaned up his trench, and it now seems we've got another piece of the inner wall.
You lose it slightly here, but then we pick it up very nicely over in this area, where you can see about 3 or 4 stones that are actually on exactly that curve.
You reckon that is the inside of it?
I think so.
Well, there's one way to test it, because if you measure from there to there...
That was 4.6 metres, you know that.
Brigid's was 4.6.
All right. If this
now,
is...
We'll run a tape out.
We think there's a stone over there that might be the outside, so...
Well, do you want to give it a try?
Why not? Let's see.
And I won't accept anything other than...
Bang on 4.6.
Is it 4.6?
Yeah, bang on.
Excellent. Brilliant.
Absolute... Well, that cracks it then.
The size of these walls shows just how monumental this structure would have been. But Phil's also uncovered a gap in the inner wall. And it seems to be intentional, as the tower builders have incorporated facing stones on either side of it.
Well, that's one possibility, is you've actually got perhaps an entrance here. I mean, you've got an alignment coming through on that side.
And you've certainly got 2 beautiful stones there.
These are very clear. So, I mean, are you actually, potentially looking at either the main entrance into the structure, or alternatively even an entrance into the gallery between the walls?
Bearing in mind how long it took us to find these walls, Phil's really got a job on his hands if he's going to reveal an entrance before the end of the day. But the crucial thing is, we now have inside and outside wall lines on 3 separate points on the ridge.
The positions of the trenches.
The evidence for a Broch would seem to be overwhelming.
What you can see here, I've got the positions of the trenches, and also been plotting in some of the walls where we actually have decent alignments. And on the base of those, I've extrapolated a circle for the inner wall and a circle for the outer wall around here. A distance between 2 walls of 4.6 metres. So is that kind of what you'd imagine it would look like?
That's about right. Looking good.
I've placed it onto the 3D model. So this is the model from the GPS survey, so it just contours this top of the hill here. And I've placed a sort of reconstructed Broch type feature, 4.6 metres wide walls, a couple of galleries. Is that the sort of thing you're expecting that site to be?
That's looking nice there. That's just perfect.
And if that wasn't enough, Just as the sun begins to break through, the space in between the walls has provided the clincher.
I actually just found this piece of pottery in the gallery just over there, and it's actually predates the 2nd century BC to 1st century AD, so perfect for the date of Broch. So,
can we now say what the Iron Age structure was that we're currently standing on?
it was a Broch.
Yes!
Yeah, I'd go along with that, it definitely is.
Yep, it's a Broch. No doubt.
So why? What is the evidence that finally gave you the confidence to say there's a Broch?
It's the structural evidence, really. You've got everything you could want. You've got the massive thick wall, you've got the galleries. It's very, very regular, it's the same all the way around. All of these things added together, and it's a Broch.
Well, that's a relief. But we still haven't finished with this site. Phil's got to determine whether or not he stumbled upon the Broch's entrance. While Brigid's Trench also continues to intrigue.
Can you see this orange here?
Yeah.
Nick, this is what we were come straight down onto the natural sand, the natural geology.
Yeah.
She now thinks the structure outside the Broch is post-medieval. But she's found definite evidence of earlier activity.
But can you see how there's this curve here cutting into the natural, and then inside we've got this very, very dark soil, and it's got quite a lot of charcoal in it.
Uh-huh.
And some of it looks as though it might be slag that's associated with metalworking. And it's had a little piece of pottery out of it, which has been dated to the Iron Age period.
Our work on the rest of the ridge has produced mixed results. The rectangular structures were probably post-medieval barns, while the strong geophys results in the trench started by Nick in the 1970s were caused by the Silver Jubilee bonfire, which was the reason Nick dug the trench in the first place. But John still believes there were other Iron Age structures on the ridge.
Look at this. I'd love to think that that's maybe something like a wheelhouse. It's pretty convincing.
What's the wheelhouse?
Well, it's a sort of stone-built chamber with lots of, like, alcoves off it, isn't it? So it looks like a wheeling plan. But the trouble with that is you don't really get them in this part of Scotland, do you? They're all sort of further north.
Could be a first.
Well, it could be, it could be. And we haven't got time to do anything about it anyway, but it's obviously just going on and on and on along this ridge, isn't it?
It's all just tumbled down.
Over in Brigid's Trench,
So
she's
all the way
found
down
just
here,
how
this is all just
industrious
tumbled.
All the way down
Applecross's
here.
Iron Age community were.
Wow!
And then we come down to this.
See this, Mick?
Yeah.
And this is a hearth or a furnace,
Right.
contemporary with the Broch. So we've got people living at the top of the hill, and we've got people doing small-scale kind of industry workings down here.
So you are thinking of metal working here then, actually producing iron?
Yeah, and what really conclusively makes it a furnace is we've actually got the slag itself, which is pretty light. So the technique that we're using was getting out all of the iron from the stone.
Yeah.
How do we know that this was happening at the same time that the Broch was around?
Well, we've got some pottery here. We've got this wonderful little bit of cordonware here. There we go.
What is it, Mick?
It's cordonware. It's a part of a big pot, but it's got a strip of pottery pressed onto the side. You can see the finger marks on it. Do we know what date this is?
That's about 200 BC. And we've also found pottery of similar date at the other end of the trench near the Broch, which makes these two contemporaneous.
It's now almost the end of day 3, and thanks to some heroic work by Phil and the diggers, the Broch has got one last surprise for us.
We thought that we had possibly a hint of an entrance coming through these big stones. So we thought, well, if this is an entrance, it ought to go right the way through the wall.
Right.
So what we did was we opened up this trench here.
Right, but this is your outer wall here, isn't it? Carrying out the way down?
Precisely. So this is not the main entrance.
Right.
What it is an internal entrance coming through from the inside of the building into here. Now the question is, where does it go? So we think that maybe, or we thought that maybe it would go this way.
Yes.
We dug there.
Fantastic.
And look what we've got, a set of steps.
Yeah, these are your steps that you would have walked up into the higher galleries, so just walking up here.
That would have basically taken you up to first floor level, so you're sort of walking around between the walls up at the first floor of the Broch.
These stairs would have led you into the very heart of the Broch. A warm, dry living area protected from the extremes of weather by a sophisticated architectural design. the Broch would have towered over this terrain, its mighty double walls defying the frequently harsh, hostile conditions of the western coast of Scotland. And yet no one can say for sure why it was built. But that hasn't stopped our team coming up with their own theories for this enigmatic building.
Wherever you went in that community, whoever you were, you'd always see that tower. It's a pillar of strength. That
it's a sanctuary.
A sanctuary. It's something which makes you feel secure.
What you're saying with the Broch is we've got the community here, we've got this area of land, it's ours, we can defend ourselves, we can defend our wives and children. You come raiding into us, we'll put our wives and children in here, and we'll come out with our swords, spears, whatever, and take you on.
Basically, I think what they are sort of very, very flashy monumental farmhouses where the sort of local social elite are likely to have lived.
It's a machine. The building works as a controlled atmosphere. And the more height you have, the more you can build in and get the temperature regulated, keep it hot all the time, or in the summer, if there is a summer here, you can cool it off as well.
I think the jury's out on what they're used for. I think it changes throughout Scotland. You can't just have one picture of a Broch.
Do you have any idea that the Broch and all the other things that are up here would have been so complex?
I had no idea at all. It's a very complicated site.
It's a beautifully made thing, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Well, a huge amount of labour. Looks to.
Pity it's not still here, really. It would have been a fantastic focal point for Applecross.
Absolutely.
When we first started to unpick this huge pile of stones in the pouring rain, the thought that we might actually be seeing structures there by day 3 seemed optimistic, to say the least. But thanks to some epic hard work from our diggers in frankly atrocious conditions, we can now see things that are clearly corridors and stairs and massive walls, the key elements of a Broch, one of the largest and most complex examples of prehistoric architecture in Britain.